Hi, I'm Matthew. Today we celebrate 70 years of WLAF being on the air. Join us for the next little while as we take you back down memory lane with some first-hand accounts from current staff members as well as many photos. And at noon we'll send it live to the studio right here where we'll have Smith Ray, who was on the air the first day WLAF began broadcasting.
Wow, 70 years. I was thinking back when I first started hanging out at the radio station. Station was probably maybe 14 or 15 years old then, and I was a little bit younger than that. But my life, a lot of my life has been spent right here at this old radio station. It was about 1967 that I would call the station a fair amount of times, and Cliff Jennings was the announcer at night in those days, and he started inviting me up to the station, and we became pretty good buddies, and I had the radio bug long before then, and that just helped further that process along. So it's been, for me, many of these 70 years I've been around here. Hard to believe it's been 70, and it's gone by so fast the few years I've been here, or the lot of years I've been here, I guess. And I look back and wonder just what we would have if I'd written down a lot of the funny stuff that happened over the years. Just so many crazy stories and odd things happening, and how many odd things can happen or funny things happen at one little radio station. And we've had a lot of those over the years. But it was probably, I guess, 1973 before I was able to really get on the payroll here. My first break to get on the air after being here with Cliff some over the years was with Paul Wright, who was the voice of the La Follette Owls, football and basketball. And I didn't play football every year, and I was able to help Paul on football games. And one of my buddies had said, Paul's looking for somebody to keep stats. And I was his man. All the stats you could do, and maybe a hamburger after the game, and that was it. But it was an opportunity to be on the air at every ball game and really start getting my feet wet in broadcasting. But all that happened right here at WLAF, and the station here has really afforded me an opportunity to, one, make a living and serve the community, and also branch out and do a few other things in broadcasting, and that's been fun. But getting a start here was a big deal for me, and lots of folks had come through here before I was here. Denny Walker and Al Rotella, of course, was on the broadcast doing the color on the basketball games back in the 50s. He was the football coach in those days too, and doubled on the radio. That was when the station was in the Fleet building. And about 1963 is when the new building, now the old building, was built, and everybody came on up here from down in the Fleet building. Hack Ayers ran the transmission line from the tower down to the Fleet building. He was 18 years old and came up here, and it was a good job for him. Brought his tractor and did all that. And Charlie Woods told me that he helped Mr. Wheeler bring in a lot of the equipment, as Ed Wheeler and Ed Bailoff were the two maybe main stockholders, maybe the only stockholders, to get the radio station on the air in 1953. But one of the funny stories about the owners, Mr. Wheeler had a couple of daughters, and so two of the announcers at the station were dating and eventually married Mr. Wheeler's daughters. One was Jim Castleberry, and had a chance to hear this story from Ed Wheeler, of course, one of the brothers, the brother of the two sisters. And he said that somewhere along the way, Jim Castleberry was let go from the radio station, and Mrs. Wheeler called Mr. Wheeler and said, "You're going to need to get Jim his job back." And he said, "Well, I don't have anything to do with the station except we own it. I don't run it day to day." And she said, "He needs to get his job back. He's here at the house and he's driving me crazy." So Jim got his job back at the radio station. But nonetheless, and he had a great career too, spawning from WLAF, and he wound up at Channel 10, WBIR Knoxville as a result. But lots of fun memories here at the station. The Fleet building years lasted about 10 years, and the hotel was still in business in those days. And we'll also be hearing from Smith Ray, Smitty we call him. Smith was on the air the very first day the station came on the air, May 17, 1953, which was a Sunday afternoon, and he went to La Follette High School, the old La Follette High School, and he'll be along to share a lot of memories. But he can give us a lot more insight about what was happening back in the 1950s and maybe the early 1960s. But Denny Walker, Dick Jones. Dick Jones, a big claim to fame probably at WLAF was the fact that he broadcast all of the 1965 Little League All-Star games. Of course, the La Follette All-Stars went on to win the state championship that year. And we have the recordings of those broadcasts. And there was one broadcast where Dick would smoke these little teeny tiny short cigars. And he actually sucked one of those little cigars down into his throat during the broadcast, had to cough it back out. But one of the funny memories of that, but what a great run it was to have the La Follette Little League All-Stars broadcast right here on WLAF. And of course in 1965, that was a major event for the community and an even bigger deal for WLAF to be able to broadcast all those games. Of course, La Follette's Owls in basketball were in the state tournament several years in the early days of WLAF radio. And La Follette had actually gone to Nashville. WLAF had gone to Nashville and broadcast the games. They were played in those days at Vanderbilt at Memorial Coliseum on the campus at Vanderbilt. And Smitty told me that he later learned after they came back home that a lot of radio stations across the state picked up the coverage of the state tournament. La Follette was in the tournament, but WLAF broadcast more than just the La Follette games. We're recording this outside the station here in the parking lot. Of course, the tower has been here since 1953. It was painted here probably about 10 years ago, repainted, and it's kind of the big landmark here in town. But not sure much what else to say, but this has been a fun ride here these 70 years, and who knows who will be here in 70 years or if this station will even be here in existence. Who knows what radio will be in 70 years. It's changed so much in the 50-plus years I've been in the broadcast business. But thanks for taking a moment to check us out here on WLAF, and a happy 70th anniversary to WLAF and all those who came before me. And thank you for setting the stage, laying the foundation here for WLAF and its continued success.
All right, going back over the last 70 years, we're going to reflect a little bit on some of the people and some of the events that have taken place here in Campbell County. Several local groups recorded music, and we played it right here on WLAF, including the Cherry Bottom Gospel Singers. Cherry Bottom, down at the lower end of the county, a great church, and it was really strong back in those days, and their people got together and recorded an album, and we played it right here, the Cherry Bottom Gospel Singers. We played the first independent missionary Baptist Church Youth People's Choir right here on WLAF. They recorded that right here on Floor Mic Records. Frank Payne did that job for them, and they had a great job. They really did. And, of course, their longtime music director there, Brenda Powell, still there today after all these years. So the first independent missionary Baptist church, they were played right here. The Gospel Crusaders was one of the popular groups around here for many, many years, up until pretty recently, really. The Gospel Crusaders recorded the album, and we played it, and they recorded others, and we played them too, but we don't have time to show all of them, but they were a great group and a great group of people. The old-time gospel singers, they sang by request, and they were mighty good singers, and they truly sang the old-time gospel music. They did a great job, and we know them and have known them, and we really appreciate them. The Doherty Quartet, and that is led by our good longtime friend Emerson Sweat. The Doherty Quartet, I didn't regret a mile. I don't regret a mile that I've traveled for the Lord. That was one of their big albums, and we played that right here. Emerson Sweat had a radio program here on Saturdays from 11 to 12 for many years, and he always come in ready to sing and preach, and they did a good job on their recordings. Roby Farmer and the Songmasters had an album, When I Step Off on That Beautiful Shore. We played that several times, and of course we knew Robbie real well, and we're so proud to include them as we look back today. The Gloryland Boys, they have been around for many, many, many years, and they always did a great job. They made some albums, and we played a lot of their music here, and a lot of the people that sang with them continued singing afterwards, and the Gloryland Boys were mighty popular. Will Jr. Thacker, he was well known as a great man in the coal business and also as a gospel singer and a gospel minister. We played his music right here. That was music produced by Frank Payne on that particular album, I'm on My Way to Canaan Land. Will Jr. Thacker brings back a lot of memories, I'm sure, to some of you. The Wright family had some great harmony, and they did several albums, and we're fortunate to have some of them, and we're showing you one of them, you that are watching on TV, the Wright family. Dal Wright and that group did a phenomenal job. As a matter of fact, I had them sing at my mother's funeral. We thought a whole lot of them, and they did such a great job. The Farmer family, that's another group, a family group that put together a great album and had some great music on it, and we played it right here. The Bruce family, that means our good friend Steve Bruce and all that he done over the years and still doing. Steve is still the pastor here in La Follette after all these years, and he's a great banjo player, and they did a great job recording, and we played a lot of their music and still do even today. That's a look at the Hymnals, and they did an album called When I Reach Home, and that music was featured here for a long time. The Snyder family is a group that did another good album, and we played a lot of their music by the Snyder family over the years. They really were talented. Leonard Dabney. Leonard was well known in this area, and of course he was the pastor at the Midway Baptist Church for several years, did a great job. Had a radio program here called Leonard's Old Time Gospel Hour, and played a lot of good old songs from the past. He worked at WNOX in Knoxville before he went full-time in the ministry, and he worked with the great Kitty Wells, who was called the Queen of Country Music and very deserving of that title. Leonard worked with her, and he worked with a lot of people, and he did a great job singing. And we also had some people in Campbell County that played on the national scene. They went beyond Campbell County to all across the country. Charlie Collins, one of them, born right up here in the mountain, and Charlie left years ago to go with Roy Acuff. And for you that don't know, Roy Acuff was considered the king of country music. He was a phenomenal showman. Charlie played the lead guitar with him for many, many years and sang quite a bit. And after Mr. Roy passed away, Charlie continued playing on the Grand Ole Opry. Larry McNeely was the one that come along after that, and he played with Charlie and Oswald and all of the others. And then Larry went on to go to play with Glenn Campbell on his nationally televised TV show. Larry was a tremendous banjo player, did a great job, and went pretty far. And we were always proud of him and all that he contributed. He later formed his own group, and they did a couple of albums. He did one with the great Gary Stewart, and they sang good together and did extremely well. That was a great accomplishment for Larry McNeely. And, of course, Campbell County's biggest claim to national fame was Dean Dillon. Dean recorded several records. The first one he recorded right here in La Follette, and it was on the Floor Mic label. Frank Payne produced that record. Now, on the record, his name was Dean Rutherford, because that's what it was. But the people in the music business didn't like that last name, so they changed it to Dean Dillon. And after that, he recorded as Dean Dillon. And, of course, he wrote many big hit songs for the great George Strait. And he continues today to be active in the music business. Dean Dillon, a member of the Country Hall of Fame. That honor was bestowed upon him last year, and he certainly was worthy of it. Back when he was here, you might remember him looking a whole lot younger and being a whole lot younger, because he was during those days, during his school days. Dean was raised down on Highway 116 between Caryville and Lake City, went to Ridgewood Elementary School, and of course he wound up from there to go on to the Hall of Fame. We had another great event here, and it was known as the Tennessee Jamboree. Elmer Longmire and all the guys put it together and did a great job, and it lasted for many, many years, the Tennessee Jamboree. And later, they went up to the East Tennessee Music Hall and had some shows there, but it was a hot spot in Campbell County in those days. Old Smoky was one of the plays that was held down in Jacksboro for several years. Old Smoky was starring Elmer Longmire and several other local people. It was a great play. If you never did see it, you missed it, and I don't know of any of it being recorded or anything available, but I saw the show live a few times, and it was a good one. It was real popular. And that's a look at some of the talent that we've had in Campbell County over the years. I hope you've enjoyed looking back. Some of you older folks may remember, like me, when it all happened because we were there. Some of you younger people only know about the history of it from what you have seen and heard, but that's the way it's been here in Campbell County. 70 years later, and we're still on the air, and we're still going strong. Thank you for all your support for the past 70 years.
My favorite part about working at WLAF, well, I can simply say that my favorite part about working at WLAF is doing my best to play something, say something, or do something that will make someone's day go just a little bit better. And when I do that, it lets them know that the listeners depend on me to make someone's day go just a little bit better. As for funny stories, I cannot think of any, but I will tell you a good story about my time here at WLAF. It was back in 2017 when WATE anchor Lori Tucker done a story on me. The story I still think about to this day was a real blessing because I got to be interviewed by one of the best news anchors in Knoxville. And the best part about that is that it just blessed my heart in some way, and I'll never forget it. Do I have a favorite artist that I love to play? Well, I have quite a few. One of my favorites is Tim Lovelace. Now, Tim Lovelace is a great Christian comedian who not only sings but does some encouraging message on Fridays during a Moments That Motivate. And what stands out to me is that no matter who my favorite artist is, whether it's Gold City or Tim Lovelace or any other artist, I do my best to play that song that will make someone's day go just a little bit better, or for someone, because if someone needs to be encouraged, let it be a message or a song that person wants to be inspired in some way. What do I think WLAF means to the community? Well, I think WLAF is the best radio station in Campbell County, not just here in Campbell County, but across the region. Because when people think of WLAF, they think of the legacy that has been a part of this community for 70 years. And for those 7 decades, WLAF has really been a great radio station to turn to, whether it's gospel music, whether it's the preachers preaching, or whether it's the informative content like news, weather, and sports. Because in this community, you never know what's going to happen. So that's why a lot of people depend on WLAF for the very latest on what's going on in the community. Does WLAF feel like a family to me? Of course, yes, because Jim Freeman and the staff have really welcomed me, and they have blessed my heart in some way. And the one great thing about WLAF is the staff, and that's why I love WLAF as a part of my family, and that has been my only radio family for about 10 years.
Well, it's 1 for the money, 2 for the show, 3 to get ready. Now go, cat, go, but don't you step on my blue suede shoe. You can do anything but lay off of my blue suede shoe. Well, you can knock me down, step in my face, slander my name all over the place, and do anything that you wanna do. But honey, lay off of my shoes, and don't you step on my blue suede shoe. You can do anything but lay off of my blue suede shoe. Oh, let's go, cat. You can burn my house, steal my car, you drink my liquor from my old fruit jar. Do anything that you wanna do, but honey, lay off of them shoes, and don't you step on my blue suede shoe. You can do anything but lay off of my blue suede shoe. Rock! For the money, 2 for the show, 3 to get ready. Now go, cat, go, but don't you step on my blue suede shoe. You can do anything but lay off of my blue suede shoe. Well, it's blue, blue suede shoe, blue, blue suede shoe, yeah, blue, blue suede shoe, baby, blue, blue suede shoe. You can do anything but lay off of my blue suede shoe.
That's it for this portion of the program. Now, after 70 years of being on the air, we send it live to the person who was here when it all began, Mr. Smith, Smitty Ray.
Well,
I'm glad to be here, that's for sure.
well, I'll tell you what, we're celebrating 70 years of WLAF being on the air. Now, I've not been here all that time, but you were here. What years were you here?
I was only here the first time about 5 months, and then I was in the Army, and then I came back for a couple of years, and then I left, never to return.
Lives in retirement. How many golf carts you say in your community?
They claim in the Villages, Florida, there are about 80,000 golf carts, and
Well.
we have about 130,000 people.
Well, I think it's great, and I don't know if I'll ever get to do that or not. However, the thing that we're starting to celebrate here, I've heard you on the phone. I've heard you with different interviews with Mr. Freeman, and I thought he was talking to a young guy, a very young guy.
Yeah, well.
And but you've been around about as long as I have, anyway.
Probably a little bit longer. I'll be 91 in November.
Well, yeah, just a little bit, but not much. Not much. I'm the oldest guy around this station, and I guess I will be till I die because I'm not going to quit. I don't think they're going to fire me just yet. But anyway, it's good to have you here. And for the folks that don't know who I'm talking to, I think everybody here probably knows me now better than they know you.
Absolutely.
After the time you've been gone. But just tell them a little bit about you and what you've done and who you are.
Well, my name, believe it or not, first name is Smith, and I was named after my father, Smith Ray Sr., who Daddy headed the La Follette Electric Department, which is now, I think, the PUB, you call it. He came here. He was moved here as as the district manager for the old Tennessee Electric Power Company before TVA. So I was moved to La Follette when I was 4 years old, and raised here. Then graduated from high school here, and I went off to college in North Carolina. And I had withdrawn from school to come home because I had been accepted in aviation cadet training with the Air Force. And while I was waiting to be called, I had a really violent kidney attack that resulted, long story short, into a major operation. So I was a young kid, 19, 20 years old, and I was recovering when my father told me they were opening a radio station in La Follette. Great news. There had been not one before, and they were looking for one local announcer. And so I started reading the paper like Walter Cronkite and went down and auditioned, and they hired me. So that's how I got to be there the first day. I was the kid on the block. It was a Sunday, May the 17th, 1953. The station signed on officially at noon, and all the city fathers, of course, we were down in the old Piedmont Hotel on the corner there in very small quarters, and all the city fathers and the county court and the presidents of the banks and several ministers were all crowded in the studio next to the control room. And so they were going to put me on the air first at 2 o'clock to do a little newscast, of which I was absolutely scared to death. And so I got the 5-minute newscast off the AP wire and went out in the lobby of the Piedmont Hotel and tried to memorize it before I was put on the air. And so finally the time came, and I remember being as frightened as I've ever been. I was afraid I'd open my mouth and no words would come forth, but my family will tell you that never happens. And so that's how it happened. Now, one other thing I'll add about there was a ceremony, of course, and there were proclamations from the governor and from the U.S. congressmen and from the senators and several statements by local dignitaries. But as a way to promote the station, they had printed up little, like 3x5 cardboard cards with pennies taped to each one. And they must have, I think they had 10,000, that's $1,000. And they had a small airplane that flew all around in circles around La Follette, dropping these things out of the door where they'd flutter down in people's yards and on the streets and all. And it simply said that WLAF 1450 on the dial is on the air now, please tune in. So that's the way they promoted it the first day. And so all day long, when someone was not making an official proclamation or a little introductory speech, they played Pennies from Heaven. And so pennies are falling from heaven. So
I guess you still remember that song, don't you?
I remember that very well.
All right. Well, Bill, you weren't around then either, were you?
No, I was awfully young back then, but we've got people like Smitty that can fill us in on it and tell us what happened. You know, when you left La Follette, you got a real promotion to the biggest radio station in this part of the country, WNOX.
Right, but I wasn't on the air. I was selling. When I decided to leave La Follette, I interviewed at 3 different places: WLW, WLAC in Nashville, and WNOX. WLAC offered me a job. They had a new contract with L&N Railroad to do 5-minute newscasts a day throughout the day, and it was going to be the L&N Star Reporter, and they wanted me for that. But there was only one trouble, and that was they didn't want to pay me as much as I was making at WLAF. So I couldn't envision moving to Nashville and having that expense. So WNOX wanted to hire me as a sales rep, so I accepted that and was there for about a year.
And you did very well.
Well, I as far as selling, we increased that category about 4,500% in a year. Yes. Mm-hmm.
How did it feel that first day when you signed on here? I know you said you were nervous and all, but there had to be a feeling of excitement.
You know, radio announcing, they say, is about like flying is. Sometimes it's long, unending hours of boredom separated by microseconds of sheer terror. So, but
Did you get all that?
but that first day, I will tell you, when they opened that mic at 2:00, and of course all the city leaders, the whole city council and ministers and the county court were all standing in the little studio staring at me, and so I did that newscast, but I made sure that I could pronounce all the foreign leaders' names correctly, but that's about it. I guess somebody heard it. I don't know.
I'm sure they did. I'm sure a lot of people were tuned in that day because they wanted to know what was happening. And that was the beginning.
All right.
And here we are. Listen, thanks, Bill. And Smitty, don't you go anyplace, because I'm going to kind of sneak out of here and let the man that I started working for Freeman a lot sooner. I didn't realize I was working for Jim Freeman for the longest time, and he was in one of the Knoxville stations as the meteorologist over there. You notice I could say that word.
Yeah.
And he would email me the weather every morning. So I'd get up at 4:00 and copy the weather off and bring it in here and have Jim do my weather in the morning. And he made out this nice book on what to do and when to do it, a nice log sheet. And I followed that for a day or two, but I must have got off track, because about 4:30 one morning, Jim called me, I guess on his way to work, or he was at work, and he said, listen, that book I gave you, I said, yeah. He said, forget it. Just do it the way you want to. And just, do it how you're doing
You're on your own.
So, yeah. So that's how I realized I was working for Jim at that point. But before that, I didn't realize that. He was a silent partner, obviously. But anyway, it's worked out well for me, and I've heard a lot of great stories about you. I hope you've heard a few about me. But they've treated me well, and the people in La Follette has treated me well. And I thank you all for the way that since I've lived here, now it's been 30 years. That's a lot longer than a lot of them's lived, but it seems like yesterday we moved here, and I've just become a part of the fixture, I guess, here at WLAF, and I've enjoyed every minute of it. And so I thank you, Bill, and I thank you, Jim. And I want to turn this over to you, buddy, when I get an opportunity here. So,
incidentally, I met. I had the honor of having dinner with Jim last evening, and I met his supervisor. Her name is Mrs. Freeman.
We're going to play some musical chairs here. Josh, enjoy your lunch.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to kind of change chairs out here. Susan Sharp is going to join us.
Okay.
She is someone who you've yet to meet. Susan, come on over and have a seat and join us here, if you
I've
will.
seen Susan on the air with her interview of the fellow that won the money on Jeopardy.
Yes. Yes. How about that?
How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Smitty?
I'm
Thank
good.
you.
I'm
So,
as good as you can be at 90. Let me put it that way.
well, 90 is a great number to be at.
Right.
So as you've looked back, tell me again, how long were you with the station?
Did I what?
How long were you with the station?
Well, I was with the station actually twice. I went the opening day, and then I was drafted into the Army in October, so that was like, 4 or 5 months. And then I came back after the Army service, which was 13 months because I had that kidney problem again and was discharged with an honorable medical discharge. And so that would have been in like December 1 year, and then I worked probably 2 years and maybe 3 months. And that's when I left and went to WNOX in Knoxville.
When you were at the station during those 2 times, what were some of the things that they started to do that were new for the industry?
Well, I don't know that it was absolutely new for the industry, but it's certainly new for La Follette. And of course, we did play-by-play basketball. In fact, Al Rotella was the football coach, and he called the basketball games. And Al and I went to Memphis, and I guess this was '56, and covered the state high school basketball tournament. La Follette was playing, and we broadcast all 16 games, and I've never been as tired in my life because there was no broadcast booth. And incidentally, in those days, when you broadcast at a football game, the engineer or somebody who was with you had to take a wire and physically wire it into a pole back there somewhere, and you sat on a bleacher on top. There was no such thing as a broadcast booth. So if it was raining, you did it in the rain. And but Al and I broadcast all 16 of those games, and I remember the final game as if it were yesterday because it was won by Linden, Tennessee, little bitty Linden, and they beat the great Dobbins Bennett High School of Kingsport. And they did it by slowing it down, and they had a player on there named Albert Ellison, who went to UT and became an All-American. Wow. So I digressed there, and I'm sorry.
No, please. We love your stories.
But as to, we did play-by-play, and of course I think you all have broadcast the fact that our first play-by-play game never happened.
Yes,
that was, and that again was one of those wiring in deals at the telephone pole that didn't work out. Because it never got on the air. I broadcast the basketball games my last year here, and that was the year after the great, legendary John R.W. Brown had retired or gone in as the State Farm dealer here, and we had a young coach from Kentucky. And that team did fairly well, but not like John's teams. I don't guess anybody, you would have hated to have followed John Brown as a basketball coach, you know. Anyway, so I don't know what else you'd like to know about except that we did a mixture of music. We had a mixture of country and popular and some sacred music. The big difference that I see in radio today in smaller markets is back then everything was like 15 minutes of this and 15 minutes of that and 15 minutes of the next, all of it different. Then came along the Today Show, and most people who watch it on television don't realize the Today Show was first on radio, on NBC Radio, and it changed the entire landscape of radio because gone was the old formal Midwestern, deep-voiced, large-voiced announcers with very, very precise breaks, and it became more conversational and easy. And so that and Rush Limbaugh, those two were tremendous influences on radio. So, but here we minded our own business, and as far as commercials, the community supported the station very, very well, and we were real happy with that, and I'm sure they still do, and they should.
Mm-hmm. They do. And we had some personalities, maybe some characters in those days. One was Denny Walker. That's a name that is still surfaces anytime we talk about the history of the station.
Right, yeah.
And Denny changed his life after he left here, but he was quite a character here at the station.
Yes, he was. Yes, Denny was a son of a single mother, and he had gotten out of high school and gone in. This was wartime, and he became a young B-25 pilot and flew combat missions. And then he came home and was in radio, and he was absolutely the best country music disc jockey I've ever heard in my life, bar none. Ralph Emery, I don't care who it is. Denny Walker was just absolutely terrific, and he had an audience that just they couldn't miss Denny's program. There was one little bitty failing, and it came in a brown bottle, and that got in the way sometimes. And I can remember Marvin Paul, the manager, calling me, usually on a Monday morning, "Can you come in here? Denny's not going to make it." So I would do it. But then Denny went on to Lewisburg, Tennessee, and found Christianity and had established a family and worked in the radio station, and finally acquired the radio station, was on the city council there, and died a real community leader. So I think he belongs in the Country Music Disc Jockey Hall of Fame, but I'm not the people that select those.
When you look at WLAF now, what do you think has been the biggest change since you were here? I'm going to guess maybe the fact that we have a website.
Oh, my goodness gracious, yeah. Well, the website is, and your news coverage. We didn't have the staff. We basically read the AP Wire. And, if a building burned down downtown, we'd say something about it, but nothing about, like you all cover stories. We just didn't have the local coverage that you do, and you do it very, very well, I think.
Thank you.
So then that was a big difference. And other than that, I'm pretty sure that everything is pretty much the same, except the programming styles changed. People's desires for entertainment changed. So that would be about the answer, I guess.
Well, now, one story that I'll share with you, you mentioned Tex Ritter last night.
Yes, I did.
And Tex came to La Follette somewhere. This was after you had left. And Earl Carroll, who was longtime chief of police here, was the local paper boy in those days. He was just a pup. And he would deliver the paper to the Piedmont Hotel to the radio station every day.
Okay.
And so he happened in with the paper one morning, and Tex Ritter was there with Denny Walker. And, of course, you can imagine what was going on.
Oh, golly.
And Earl said, as I became older, I realized that they were probably indulging in some beverage, and they were trying to kind of maybe cover that up, but he had no idea what was going on. But Tex Ritter came to the station, and, again, that's been late 50s, I would think.
Yeah. He was a great entertainer, great singer. High Noon, who could ever forget that?
Yeah. Now, of course, you were on the air that very first day.
Right.
Did you record anything in those days? Was that a time that you maybe recorded something, maybe archived anything, or
no? No.
So once it was on the air, it was gone.
Well, it was gone. It was gone. Right. We may have recorded a few ball games to catch a few exciting moments, but not that I can remember. Much,
Okay. Well, now, I think that we talked about the state tournament coverage.
Right.
You and Coach Al Rotella were broadcasting the games. Now, there was some way that some of the other stations picked up your coverage. Is that
They bootlegged them.
Okay,
and,
there you go.
That's exactly what they did. And when we got back from that, we kept hearing these reports, and I would every now and then see somebody that I knew, maybe from Morristown or wherever, and they said, "We heard you on the state tournament." Huh? How'd you hear La Follette over there? Well, it was on our local station. So as best we could ever put together, somebody in Knoxville had bootlegged those games to about 20 more stations up in East Tennessee.
Wow.
And of course, WLAF didn't get a dime for it, you know. But anyway, yeah, that happened.
Well, now, you mentioned Al Rotella, who was the football coach here, and it may have been his first year. The team went undefeated and had a really good team. Would you share the conversation with us about the connection between Coach Rotella, his son, and Tennessee football, and La Follette and radio station?
Well, of course, Al and I became good friends. As a matter of fact, when I left the station, Al, who was pure 100% unadulterated New Jersey Italian, got him to close the restaurant in the Piedmont Hotel, which was not really that well patronized at night anyhow. And he threw me a big spaghetti dinner with about 35 or 40 people. And I'll never well forget Rotella doing the spaghetti in the kitchen. The way he tested it, he took a fork and would get some, he'd throw it against the wall. And if it stuck, it wasn't done, and if it slid too quickly, it was overdone. But at any rate, of course, they had a son that was born not born here, but he was a baby when they came here. I used to hold him on my knee, and he became an All-American linebacker at Tennessee. Al was a unique fellow. You couldn't meet him and not like him. He always had a smile on his face, and he was quite rotund. He weighed probably almost 300 pounds. He didn't when he played. He was like a sixth man on a basketball team for General Neyland in the line on those teams, and he played on some really good teams. I think Al is gone, and he went on from here to Irving, Tennessee, and took with him Ray Chapman. Was his name Arliss Chapman, the fellow that was like the county commissioner or something? That was Ray and Lotus Chapman's younger brother. Ray Chapman and Lotus were good football players, but Ray was an excellent football player, and he started 3 years for Tennessee as a center. And he coached when I was in Irving one time and visited with Al, and Ray was his assistant coach. So I don't know where he wound up, but he was a great, great football player. And you had another one in Hugh Garner, who was a great football player.
Well, I'm hoping you can help me with something. I've heard a rumor that Tom T. Hall, the music legend, actually painted the outside of the radio station at one point.
You know, I don't know. That's the first I've ever heard of that.
I heard a story this morning, I won't say where I heard it from, maybe my husband, that Tom T. Hall used to go around painting radio stations and putting up towers. And he said, see if you can find out if he did that for WLAF.
Well, I tell you what, Tom T. Hall was kind of a neighbor of mine in Williamson County outside of Nashville. Now, I say kind of, he lived like a mile and a half away, but over the hill. But no, I never heard anything about it. I never heard that.
Well, when I got here this morning and I asked Bill, he said, I'm not the guy to ask. He'll be here in a little bit.
No,
so,
I never heard that at all.
Well, we're going to have to find out, Jim. Yeah, we're going to have to find out.
Well, now, share with us the atmosphere here when you were growing up. The school was over here across the street next to First Baptist Church, the high school.
The high school.
And did you live on Nevada Avenue?
No. I lived on East Central Avenue.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah.
Up near
I lived next to where the bailiffs lived, across the street from now, I think it's Walter's Funeral Home.
Yes, okay.
Mm-hmm. And incidentally, I noticed this morning that the bailiff house is not there anymore.
Well, it burned
And
2 years ago.
last year, I
It's been it's been a little while. They just recently kind of took away what was left.
Well, I lived in that house that's now about to fall over in the street, it looks like.
Okay.
But at that time, you have to remember that the street went out to where the yellow line is in the highway now.
Okay.
And so we had nice front yards and big trees and everything, and it was really nice.
Now, did you walk to La Follette High School from there?
Walk to school every day, huh?
Okay, and you went to elementary school at East La
East La
Follette?
Follette, as
Okay.
did my brother, who's with me here today, and
Okay.
David.
Now, Guy Easterly was the La Follette Press.
Yeah, he owned it and was the editor and publisher. Right?
And if you would share with us your La Follette Press, you were at the press before you came to
well,
WLAF.
Right, yeah, I was a newspaperman. I was in the during the war. Guy Easterly, I think, was 4F and could not serve, and so there was a shortage of talent for many things, and so he was also, in addition to running the La Follette Press, was the principal of East La Follette School, and he when I was in the 7th grade, he taught our arithmetic class. And so at any rate, long story short, he arranged with my parents, it was all right with them. He needed a printer's devil, as it was. They printed the paper on Wednesday night for Thursday delivery. And so they arranged that I could get out of school at like 2:30 on Wednesday afternoon and go to La Follette Press and basically sweep the floor and then help them wrap the papers that were going to be mailed out, and then on Thursday come back and clean up what was there. So I did that for, I guess, 2 or 3 years. And funny thing is that when I filled out my inquiry for the Army, what jobs did you have? I said, the La Follette Press newspaper, which was a kid's job, and it was the truth. And of course I had WLAF. And when I was processed after basic training, they said, now you've got newspaper experience. I said, yes, I do. So they made me editor of the Fort Bragg News. But anyhow, I'm sorry.
I think that's a true battlefield promotion right there, from printer's devil to editor.
Right. Yeah. That was one of those jobs you went into and say, what is it I'm supposed to do?
Yeah, I've been there. We'll talk. Okay, we'll talk.
What you've been back to La Follette probably 20 years after you left, I guess, in the 50s, came back in the 70s. What are some of the dramatic changes that have taken place in La Follette compared to your days, early days?
The traffic down here on the Jacksboro Pike, the traffic, number one. Mm-hmm. And other than that, not a lot. But I didn't spend much time. Those visits were like licking a split, maybe I guess the first time I really came back was to my 50th high school reunion. And that was, I was telling my folks as we drove up here from Carrollville this morning that across from the new high school, the Campbell County High School, there used to be a drive-in theater. I don't know if you remember that.
Skyway. Mm-hmm.
Well, I was a little kid when Russell Claiborne had a construction company. I spent a whole summer working for Claiborne Construction with a little wagon and a little tractor moving all the rocks off that whole hill. Just for myself.
Oh, my goodness.
That's what I did one whole summer, cleaning where that drive-in theater went in. So anyhow, I'm sorry.
So you had a hand in the drive-in theater getting it?
Well, I cleaned the rocks off before they built it.
Somebody had to do it, right?
Right, yeah. Had to be done.
And about what year would that have been?
Oh, golly. I was probably in, I guess it was in high school.
Mm-hmm.
I can't truly remember. I was not a senior, I know that.
And some of the names of the teachers, your principal through high school.
Well, of course, the great Hope Dossett. Who would ever forget Hope Dossett? And, of course, the Dossett name in education has been famous. He had a brother or an uncle, I don't know which, that was president of East Tennessee State.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And then, Hope Dossett, who was the principal of Follette High School during the war and with the shortage of people, he was the head of education for the Cherokee Nation over in Cherokee.
Okay.
Which I always thought was interesting.
Pretty impressive.
But at any rate, I don't want to mention teachers because I'm surely going to forget somebody. But in fact, one of the teachers at the high school was an announcer the first day 70 years ago. This place went on, Carl Smith.
Okay.
And he was the band, a music teacher.
Carl Smith, would he have been perhaps the person who started the first La Follette marching band?
Yep,
okay.
He surely was.
Wow, impressive.
Yeah.
And you played the football games back behind what is now Liberty Park, behind the old high school.
We went down this morning and looked, and of course now they have badminton courts, and I think there was a roller dome or something. But anyway, but yes, that's where the football games were, down behind the First Baptist Church.
Well, now, by the looks, at least of one section of those bleachers look as if they may have been the original bleachers.
Yeah, they're concrete. They were concrete.
Okay, all right.
Right.
Okay, very good. Well, Smitty, anything else that comes to mind you'd like to share with us on this 70th anniversary and your return visit?
No, except I am glad to be here, and I want to congratulate you for the job you're doing here with the community and for the community, and wish you the best of luck in the future.
Well, thank you. Well, it's a team effort here. I got to tell you that. Well, thank you for taking time and coming to visit, and this has just been a true pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Smith,
good to see you.
Good to see you, Smith. Smitty Ray Jr., Matthew Moore, thank you. Susan Sharp, thank you. For Bill Waddell and Big Josh, Jim Freeman here. Matthew Moore has more programming surrounding this 70th anniversary coming up here on WLAF.
Well, I think the next generation is never going to be able to comprehend all that we've done. This is not going to mean anything to them unless you were there when there was no television. You can't really comprehend that. If we don't somehow leave behind a real true picture of how life was, they're never going to know. You got to get it across to them how it used to be, and especially being in the history books, because they have done a lot. Those that perform week after week, they did a lot of work in their lifetime, and sure, it means a lot to them. And if you can get people interested in looking it up and researching it, they I think will have a greater appreciation for those musicians. They did not have the equipment that we have. They had to travel in car from place to place. They didn't have elaborate buses. They didn't have jets. They had to do it the hard way. They'd do a show and then drive for hours and rest a little bit and go out and set up all their equipment, do another show. They sacrificed how they'd load up the car after a show, and they'd talk to people, and they had to take their guitar, their banjo, or the fiddle, or the bass, or whatever they had, and stand up there and sing. They contributed a lot to country music and the gospel and the bluegrass. I mean, they are the ones that made it the hard way. I can't talk to my grandkids about the good old days because they just say, how could that be? You had to try somehow to explain it to them. They'll never get to sit in the audience at the Tennessee Jamboree or the Midday Merry-Go-Round. They'll never get there. There will never be anything to take its place. And all we can do is let them hear the way it was and let them imagine the way it was back then. If they're interested in music to start with, chances are they're interested in how did it used to be. And you need to get it across to them, this is how it was. There was 50 people that went into this auditorium, and they sat down, and this is what they heard.
We've got a good crowd on hand already, and we know it's real early yet. And you folks listening in have still got plenty of time now to come on out and be with us. Got plenty of seats for you tonight, plenty of parking room, and we're going to have a real turn-down time, my grannies, here on the Big Tennessee Jamboree tonight. We got a whistling microphone here, too. We're going to try to eliminate, here in a minute. But anyway, we're going to get right into the program now and kind of call all the boys around. And what do you got, Carlos? The Remington Rag. Let's go.
Well, there are still some people alive that remember when that station came on the air. It was on a Sunday afternoon, May 17th, 1953 at 2 o'clock. And people remember that. They threw out some things with a plane that was flying overhead. And one fellow at the Historical Society still has one of those pennies that was dropped out. And we still have people that will, say, I remember when you all came on the air. They have been, a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them have been faithful listeners for all of those years. They depended on us then, and they depend on us now. They had no way of knowing the score of a ball game or anything unless somebody come back and tell them, hey, we won tonight or we lost tonight. They had no way of knowing that. And you didn't have the communication. Everybody's got a cell phone in their pocket, and everybody talks to everybody constantly. You couldn't do that back then. It wasn't available. So people, if they wanted to know what happened at a public meeting, they would have to wait until the local newspaper came out the Thursday of the following week to find out about it, unlock to somebody that went. And a lot of people, especially then, would go to bed early and get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. They didn't keep up with the public meetings. They just wait till later and read about it. They could never see it live or see it played back or hear about it right after it was over. That's changed drastically. People didn't drive around back then as much, and they went to bed very early. And the same thing with obituaries. If somebody down on the lower end of Caravel had a good friend up on the other end of La Follette that died, it'd be hard for them to get that word because somebody'd have to come along and tell them. And if somebody told them wrong, they just made a big mistake. And, oh, I'm sorry, he didn't die. I heard later. Well, you didn't have it confirmed.
Oh, I thought it was a plus by all means because we only had the La Follette Press, and it was a weekly paper. And I'll tell you what, most everybody had a radio. This was before TV come in this area. And, well, the local news and the local people, all they got was the La Follette Press. Or they may pick up a radio station. I don't know. I know we had them in Knoxville. And they might have been a radio station in Clinton at that time. I don't remember. But we needed a radio station, and it was wise thinking because it was a plus for the whole county because, you can get local news, and then you can have all of these programs. So anyhow, the radio station has been great.
Yeah, I remember when they started. They started down there in that old Piedmont hotel. It's still standing up there, and they had their office in one corner of it down there. It was small. It was years before they built that building where they're at now. Oh, they're big time, man.
Yeah, I can remember them hearing talk about a radio station starting over here in La Follette. I thought, boy, we moved up. And I never was around the station much till later on. They were a lot of people over in here that played and sung over the station, but it was later on that before I ever got to be there. Yeah, we'd listen to it when we'd pick it up. It wasn't a real stout station, and you had to be so close to it to pull it in.
It was in a little old place downtown business. R.A. Cordell, I think it was, I think maybe he might have had sold some music stuff in that store. Oh, that's been so long I forgot. But that's where the first hit there. And then he got up there in an old hotel, Piedmont it was back then. They set up in there. And it stayed there till they built up where they at now. Been a while though. First day it come on there. Oh God, it was big. Yeah, that big.
There was a boy by the name of Denny Walker. He was from down in Lawrenceburg, Tennessee, that his mother lived here. And, of course, he lives in Lawrenceburg, like I say, but he come here to live, and he got a job with WLAF. And Denny, we became good friends. And he's actually the one that wanted to start a jamboree. And I told him that would be a good thing to do. Let people come and watch us play and maybe drop a quarter or two and help us out a little. Well, the first time with the La Follette High School, but we also played down at the electric department. We were down there. I can remember me and Robert Stevens, and I want to say Monroe Queener. Seems like, but Billy Ray Bird played banjo. I remember that. And Robert had a couple of boys in his band.
I think that's when they were the Robert and the Blue Valley Boys back then in the old high school building. I think they played there. Of course, Carlos and Monroe and all them played at it. I think that's where they started. Robert come with us, see, and was looking for a name, and he said, why don't we just call it Blue Valley Boys? He said, I was one of them. And everybody said fine with us, and we went with Blue Valley Boys too. And with that group, I am original.
Apparently, there was a Blue Valley Boy group. Robert Stevens was involved in the early stages of this group. Now, I didn't even know about that. They may tell it even, they've got some angles about this probably that I don't even remember, but I do remember. Elmer he was living in Coolidge at the time. Like I said, they mostly grew up out there and stayed there as adults. One particular meeting I remember they had, I remember Red and Monroe, and I'm not sure about the other guy. I believe it was Carlos Henderson. And they came to Elmer's house one day, and I was there. I spent a lot of time with Elmer when I was growing up. And I remember they were in the process then of getting him to get into a band, forming a band. I don't know whether it would have been they were getting him into a band already there or they were just forming a new band from scratch. That's the part that I remember about the Blue Valley Boys establishment, is when they were out there that day at his house and they were discussing him leading the band, you know. I guess that was the thrust of the meeting. They wanted him to take hold of it and take charge and run with it.
As long about the time Elmer Longmore took over. I think Monroe and Elmer became big buddies. I think that's the way it come out. Monroe and of course I was just playing fiddle and just picking along, you know, and I thought, well, hey, you know, Elmer will sell us, you know, which he would. He would just get out there and blast it, you know.
Elmer Longmore's got to be the manager of that station in the 60s, early 60s. I think he started with the Blue Valley Boys about 62, I think, best I remember. All I remember is being Tennessee Jamboree at the American Legion building back when we started it. And I think that was about 62, 63. It's Monroe, Henry Horn. Gosh, I can't remember. Charlie Collins. I'm about to forget him. We called him Peanut back then. Carlos Henderson. Later, LC. Of course, Robert Stevens was in that bunch. Dean Huddleston. And a fellow by the name of, we called him Pap Jones. His name was MT, but Pap Jones had Pap and the Younglings back in them days, too. He had got a job up at the radio station as an announcer, you know, and there was a furniture store downtown. Elmer got us to come down there and pick up our, and we was Pap and the Youngins then. And he got a spot up there for, in the daytime, I can't remember what time, but every Saturday I think it was. And he started with us then. That's in 60, I guess that's about 62, early 62.
And before long, they got the American Legion building down there. Well, it's a band, I think Charlie Collins was, and Red Harris, and Carl Stump, and Dean Huddleston, And that's about it.
Elmer, Carlos, Dean Huddleston, Red Harrison, and of course Charlie and Larry was there then. And that's ones that really was the main ones.
Well, the Blue Valley Boys, they was the house band, I guess you'd call them.
The best of I remember, it was Elmer, Longmire, Red Harris, Dean Huddleston, Monroe Queener, and Carlos Henderson. I think was the main ones in their group.
I guess they leaned a little bit more towards the Roy Acuff side of the old-time music, you know. There was bluegrass, but it was, of course, Monroe Queener, he done a lot of Roy Acuff songs, and then some he done. It was just, I guess, about like any of the rest of it, just whatever come to mind to sing, work on it, work it out, and play it.
They were the biggest part of it. You couldn't have all superstars. You had to have a little local entertainment. You know, these guys would go to high schools and fairs and different places, and you know, we'd have a lot of announcements. You know, they're going to be here, going to be there, and you'd hear it all the time where they were performing. They were a big part of the community. So, you know, in this area, we done pretty good for a small community, and people came out for it.
Oft I sing for my friend, wind is cold for my sea, and when I am gone, will someone sing for me? I wonder who will sing for me when I'm called to cross death's silent sea. Who will sing for me? When the voice of my King shall call me home above, oh, who then will sing the parting song I love? I wonder who will sing for me when I'm called to cross death's silent sea. Who will sing for me?
Of course, the jamboree was on Saturday night. I think 7 o'clock to about 11, 7 to 11, at the American Legion building. We had a wonderful time. It was a good, clean show, and everybody just seemed to enjoy. They just reared back and had a wonderful time. We had a good audience every Saturday night. Oh, they were several. They come faithful every Saturday night.
And before long, they got the American Legion building down there. And it was every Saturday night. Lord, they draw some crowds. Well, they'd pack that building every Saturday night. And it had a big auditorium. I'd say it'd probably seat 100 people, maybe more than that. But usually, most time, it was standing room. Everybody get there early and get the seats, then they'd stand around the wall. Well, it is noisy.
Oh, it held a bunch of people. It was just a big old stage, and then the rest of it was seating. And they had some kind of a little snack bar in there.
Yeah, concession stand out in front.
Most of the time
it was full house. People loved to go down there. They enjoyed the music and had a good time. They just wanted to go down and have a good time on Saturday nights. Different ones come, but he had a regular bunch that was there every Saturday night, buddy. They were faithful people. It was just like going to work on Monday morning. When Saturday night got there, they was there.
Oh, for sure. The Saturday night was, that was for the jamboree. That was always given. As far as describing that show, I would think that if you want to see some good music, especially around that area, you wanted to go to the Tennessee Jamboree, and for a big segment of that time, that was the only show. So if you wanted a good show, the Tennessee Jamboree was pretty well known. He had some of the notable musicians.
Yeah, they wasn't nothing really other than the Tennessee Jamboree. And you had to either go to Clinton or Knoxville or up in Renfro Valley. Was about the only things else anywhere close around. Buddy, people just loved to go down here. It was close, had good musicians, good place to go to.
It was
really
a clean
turned out.
show too.
Yeah.
I mean, you didn't see a lot of stuff like you see now going on. It was a clean show. You could take your kids.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you could.
And not be afraid of what they was going to see or hear.
Well, it was a little more down home, and of course they didn't have as many entertainers, but they were about as well known then as the ones in Knoxville. They were kind of on the same level. The entertainment was great because back then you'd have a big crowd and they'd all enjoy it. So they were pretty much along the same line. The people in neighboring counties especially, they would come, and then a lot of times somebody in Knoxville would be on one of the programs, Kaz Walker Farm and Home Hour or Bonnie Lou and Buster, and they would announce that they would be at the Tennessee Jamboree next Saturday night, and so word got around. I mean, the people over there knew about it, and some of them would come. They didn't come every week, but they'd come periodically.
This is on Saturday night on down about a mile south of La Follette. There's a concrete block building up there. And we got that building, and we run it right there. And then we started that jamboree down there, and buddy, it just absolutely bloomed out like flowers. It was running over every Saturday night, buddy. I mean, I'd go down early on Saturday morning, and then we'd play around and go up to the radio station and play. And we'd just all get together and jam session, have a good jam session all day and half the night.
They broadcast this jamboree live every Saturday night.
They had some kind of remote where the American Legion is. That was where they had their show live, and it was transmitted from there to the main station.
And I remember several times he would call down at the radio station and get more time, on the air so that he could get everybody on. I think you just go out and do how many songs you wanted to do.
They'd be jamming in the back anyway, before the jamboree. Everybody, what they called jamming backstage. And then Elmer would line it up to who's going to be there and when he wanted them on. In his head. Kept the pace going because he's on the radio and he about had to. And he knew how to do that. He'd come back there. He'd say, "You're next."
Oh yeah, well, we had some music back then. You ought to been here. Yeah, these crowd. A lot of times they're standing around the walls. Yep. It's the biggest thing back then going anywhere around here. I don't know, it's just kind of, we was all kind of homely, I guess you'd put it. Everybody had something in common, you know. We done all traditional stuff that everybody could relate to. It just worked, buddy. Stuff like that ain't no more. Just ain't no more. Kind of makes you homesick of thinking about it.
Boys, I'll tell you what, our time is come and gone. Looks like we've had a good time here on the Jamboree. Friends, hope you've enjoyed it. Don't forget our fine sponsors. Brings you the Jamboree. A good buddy, Don Nance Guff down at Jacksboro. Also, Richland Grocery, Jacksboro Station. Car Equipment Company on Middlesboro Highway, and of course their truck lot across from the Woodson Shopping Center. Then Bircham Tire and Battery, your Kelly Springfield dealer. Hard White Electrical Service. They all bring you the Tennessee Jamboree here on Saturday night. We've had a nice time, friends. You have a nice weekend. We'll see you again next Saturday night on the Big Tennessee
Our 70th anniversary coverage continues here on WLAF. May the 17th, 1953, WLAF coming on the air. And here 70 years later, we're celebrating that 70th year. Johnny Lettner, the coach of the 1965 All-Star team that won the state championship in Tennessee from La Follette, is here. Coach, this time has gone by quickly since 1965.
You know, I wonder where the time went. It don't seem like just a few days ago that I was coaching the Little League out here, but time has just zoomed by. I'm 82 years old now.
Going on 83.
Going on 83.
You're looking good.
Well, I'm in pretty good health. Of course, right now they've got me on dialysis 3 days a week there, but other than that, my health's pretty good.
When in 1965, you and Junior Honeycutt took the All-Stars all the way to the state championship game, won it, and came back to La Follette. Where are some of the travels that the team went on that run? It was every game was a road game.
Well, some of the other coaches told us we'd never get past Clinton. Mm-hmm. You know, Clinton was the team that always beat La Follette, and I talked to Junior about it. I said I'd like to beat Clinton. And we went down there and we just beat the socks off of Clinton. We beat them about 8 or 9 to nothing down there at Clinton on their field.
First game,
yeah. And Clinton's always been tough. They always dominated this area here, but we took them on and we beat them.
Now, from the Clinton game, what was next?
Well, we played Jellicoe. We beat Jellicoe about 14 to nothing, I think it was. And then we went and played Sevierville. We had to play Sevierville there, and then later we played Maryville. We traveled quite a bit. After we got past Maryville, we had to go to Johnson City.
One of the fun things about this tournament run was the fact that Dick Jones from WLAF was there broadcasting every game live right here on the old radio station.
He did a great job. WLAF really surprised me. I wonder sometimes how they're going to be able to broadcast our games. You know, we went down and represented the state of Tennessee down in Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, they can't broadcast from Georgia. We're just a country station.
And they did.
They did a great job. My mother and dad listened to all those games. They really enjoyed it. And they told me, they said, how they broadcast like that all over the place, travel.
Mm-hmm.
But you all did a great job.
Yeah, phone lines, amazing in those days. Now, of course, this was classic small town stuff going on that summer of '65. You go to Georgia and you're up into the month of August. It was almost time for school to start.
Right. I told Junior, I said, if we keep winning ball games here, these kids are going to be out of school for a while.
When you went to Georgia and lost there, that's where the run came to an end, but it was quite a run.
Yeah, I'd like to say something. Mm-hmm. What happened, we stayed there at the dormitory at the University of Georgia, and I didn't know they had a swimming pool down there. Mm-hmm. And our boys, we couldn't find our boys, and they was all in the swimming pool. So that night, at the ball game, they come to the ball game, they were just dragging around. Their eyes were red, shot there.
Sunburn.
Yeah, and we just didn't play a bit of it. We got beat the first inning. Our boys just blew up. And I don't know, but I still feel we could have beat Georgia. Mm-hmm. We could have beat Georgia. Mm-hmm. What happened? I called timeout and told Junior, I said, Junior, we got to make a pitching change. James Carson was pitching, but he kind of blew up a little bit. We put Quinn Smith in, and Quinn Smith did a great job. He shut him out the rest of the ball game. Uh-huh. And I told Junior maybe we should have started Quinn, but Quinn did a great job for us. Now,
coming home, state championship, you have the trophy, a parade is thrown here in town.
Yeah, they met us down at Carroll and gave us a big parade there. We weren't expecting that. I wasn't. I was shocked. Big crowd down there. Mm-hmm. And they escorted us all the way to La Follette.
Well, of course, as part of the run, you're traveling, you're in motels, you're eating out every game. How did the community come together, aside from this big parade? How did the community rally around you to support the team and all those road trips? Well, they were great. The fans were. They were just simply great. We met a lot of people, and we talked to a lot of people down there when we got to La Follette, and they were just great. Now, the business community rallied around the team. Right. They gave us a banquet there here in La Follette, and those kids really appreciated that. Of course, like I say, time goes by so fast. I saw a couple of our ball players here about a year ago. I didn't even know them. Things have changed in 50 years, haven't they? Yeah, but them boys said, Coach, don't you recognize us? I said, boys, it's been 50 or 60 years since I've seen you all. We're visiting with Johnny Lettner, the living legend, coach of the 1965 All-Star State Championship baseball team from here in La Follette. Coach, what else comes to mind that you'd like to share with us? I'd like to say this much. Junior Honeycutt was a good coach. Mm-hmm. I liked him. He took over from Bob Chapman of People's National Bank. Well, he beat me first half. I finished up of the season. Yeah, first half of the season. I finished up with 9-1 first half. Then we had the second half, and then Junior Honeycutt took over the People's National Bank team, and I had to beat him to go to the All-Stars. Okay. So I finished up 9-1 the second half. We had a playoff, so we had to have a playoff, and I beat Junior in the playoff 5-3. Okay. But they got with us. They put us both together as coaches, and we did good. Wow. Great results. 1965 seems like yesterday. The station had been on the air only 12 years at that stage. Here we are at year number 70 today. Yeah. I'm pleased with the station. The station's doing a great job here, and they broadcast all our Little League games back then, and it's real fun. A lot of fun. Johnny Lettner, thank you for taking time with us today. Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you, Jim. Johnny Lettner here on this 70th anniversary of WLAF, and thank you for joining us here. We're on AMFMTV.com, WLAF.